need to be in the middle tables. How's that? This is being webcast internationally, so we want to begin right away because we have well over 70 people registered for online participation. So So we'll begin the morning by saying good morning to everybody here in Toronto, Canada. 8:30 in the morning here in Toronto, and we have a number of people from around the world online on the webcast. I noticed just earlier some from Europe, some from Australia, who I think it's the middle of the night, some in Africa, etc. So that's wonderful to see that. My name is Gail Hall, and I'm the chair of IPLAN, the International Prior Learning Assessment Network, which is part of the Canadian Association of Prior Learning Assessment. And we are delighted to be able to host this international webcast. Just for those folks online who may not be familiar with CAPLA, I just wanted to note that CAPLA is Canada's nonprofit volunteer association for those involved in prior learning assessment and recognition, RPL, APEL, whatever it may be called in other places. And it was formed in 1994. Its membership consists of individuals, associations, organizations, government, etc., from across Canada and more from around the world. So we encourage and invite those who are online to actually join CAPLA if you are able to, and help participate in many of our international events and discussions. So you could just go to www.capla.ca and find out about membership there. The IPLAN, or our network, is basically a network pulled together to share ideas and resources. And we do this mainly through things like this conference, through webinars, webcasts, and other ways online of sharing good practices, ideas, and exchanging lessons learned. So the panel today is actually almost a follow-up to last year's IPLAN session, where we talked about the UNESCO guidelines for the recognition, validation, and accreditation of informal and non-formal learning. And those guidelines cover, it's an online document. Again, it's a nice, clear document, simply an overview and some guiding principles, purposes that we can all work towards worldwide in developing, implementing RPL in a positive, fair, and quality manner. And today's panel then, we have here on this panel, we're going to showcase a few international examples which will show you how they follow or fit in with these guidelines. And the examples we're going to be using today with our panelists, we have Deb Blower, who is from Red River College in Winnipeg, Canada. She's here representing her perspective on the participation of Red River College through the Canadian Association of Colleges that was part of this project in partnership with Brazil. And Hanne Kristensen from Norway is going to be talking about what they've done in the vocational education system within Norway. And then the other seat on the panel that you see there is James Keevy. And James, I was saying to somebody this morning that we should be able to have these 3D interpretations now. James is in South Africa, and he's going to be joining us online for his presentation as the third speaker. And then Hanne is going to end with just a discussion and an explanation of an upcoming observatory from UNESCO. So without further, just the comment though as well, if you have questions for those who are online, you could actually put them into your chat online, and we will be watching them here and try and compile them. Any questions, we will save questions for the end for these panelists, but any questions that we're not able to address today, we'll try and compile and put some answers online with the video on the CAPLA website following this session. So I'm going to invite Deb Blower to come up and tell us about the Brazilian project. Deb?
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening and the middle of the night to all of those folks who are joining us online. I am very pleased to be here to speak a little bit about the work and the role that our college was very fortunate to play in the 1,000 Women Project that took place over 4 years, a couple of years ago. Thank you, Gail, for inviting me to speak on this. The 1,000 Women Project, I'm going to give a brief overview of that project. But before I started that, I wanted to link the project to the UNESCO RVA guidelines. And when we look at those UNESCO guidelines, we realize that there are very strong statements related to recognizing and valuing all types of learning, ensuring that learning, informal, non-formal, and formal learning is valued at the same, is equal, valued at the same level. We also see in the guidelines that there is something about improving self-esteem and self-confidence and well-being of the learners who are involved in the processes related to RVA. We also note in the guidelines that there is a motivation to further learning and to strengthen labor market opportunities. There's equity and inclusiveness mentioned in the process and with regard to learning opportunities. And those are key things to keep in mind as I share a little bit with you about this project. This project in Brazil was about empowering women. It was called the 1,000 Women Project because it was a life-changing project for over 1,000 women who took part in the project throughout Brazil in the years between 2007 and 2011. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project, and I've interspersed it with some clips with the help of some wonderful technicians here, some clips right directly from the project. So I hope you'll be able to view these clips a little later when you have some time, view the whole video about the project. Essentially, the project was a collaborative partnership between Canadian colleges and institutes, and led, of course, by the Association of Canadian Community Colleges. The Brazilian IFECT system was also very much involved. It was their project. It was a very important collaboration in this project with all of the key partners. And of course, CETEC in Brazil was involved in this. The project was funded by the Canadian government through CETA in collaboration with the support of the Brazilian Secretariat. In terms of the Canadian partners, though, I mentioned CETA and I mentioned ACCC, but there were also some colleges, many colleges, that were involved in this. And some of the examples of colleges who took part in this project were Niagara College, George Brown College, a College Montmorency, the New Brunswick College of Art and Design, Marie-Victorine, Cégep in Quebec, Red River College, and as the project went on, other colleges joined this particular project. To get us started, I'm going to show you a short clip of the project.
The 1,000 Women program promotes the increase of the formal education and social inclusion of needy women in the poorest areas of the country. In the classrooms of Federal Institute, formerly called CEFETs, these women acquire professional qualifications enabling them to improve their quality of life as well as that of their families and communities. Inspired by a Canadian experience with communities at social risk, the 1,000 Women program is the result of a combined effort of the Brazilian Ministry of Education and the Canadian College Association. Initially, the program is being implemented in Brazil's north and northeast, areas where social and gender inequality is strongest. The project offers courses in accordance with the educational needs of each community and the economic vocation of the area.
Só do prato principal. O garfo sempre do lado esquerdo, a faca do lado direito, um corte para fora.
Besides improving their educational level, the 1,000 Women program evaluates and acknowledges students' previous learning experience, as well as the knowledge and the skills they have acquired throughout their lives.
São generosos, né? Como é que vocês conseguem dar? Eu começo a negar sistematicamente aquilo que eu sou.
The certification from a federal institute gives them the possibility of finding a better position in the labor market, either by getting a more qualified job or by getting a better price for their products. For these women, the 1,000 Women program represents the possibility of a new life, the right to dream and make their dreams come true.
So, the project's goal, and as was mentioned in the video clip, the primary goal was truly to support the social and economic inclusion of disadvantaged women in the north and northeast of Brazil, enabling them to improve their employability skills and the lives of their families and community. It was a far-reaching project, and again, the project brought in, I think, some of the key principles and the statements in the RVA guidelines. The one particularly that comes to mind for me is empowering the centrality of individuals and making sure that they are centered to the work that we do when we put into place RPL practices. So the purpose was to contribute to the capacity development of the IF system. And the IF system in Brazil are federal institutes, and they're very similar to Canadian colleges and institutes. But they wanted to develop techniques and approaches to curriculum that would allow disadvantaged women to be successful. They wanted to develop some access services, training, and linkages to employers that would enable them to enter the workforce. And that truly happened in this particular project. So throughout the project work and the outcomes, the Canadian and Brazilian partners, it was truly a collaborative project. There was much rich learning to be shared from the Brazilian institutes and the Brazilian partners. I think as the project progressed, the partnership was strengthened as we learned about the systems in Brazil and the work that was done and the commitment that the Brazilian partners had to this particular project. We also were able to help with some areas, and I'll just share a bit about those and then get into some around the RPL. The Canadian colleges and the IFs worked on the systems and infrastructures, policies and procedures were developed, and those were specifically developed to provide access services. These were very disadvantaged women who had never in their lives been able to attend a college. Some of them perhaps had some schooling, and some were at a stage where they were very interested in moving forward. The centers were set up throughout North and Northeast Brazil, and the centers were designed to be welcoming, to be reaching out into the community. Some were even right in the community. The women were bused to some of the schools, to the IFs, so that they could take part in the activities. So access was very, very critical to this project. You'll also note on the slide that tools and techniques of PLAR that would increase access for this population were also built in. Based on the Canadian use of PLAR over the past 20 years, the Canadians were invited to share their practices. In particular, in the early work of the project, Niagara College was very involved in the early work of this project, and Marty Germain, who many of you may know, was certainly one of the leaders for the PLAR team. The capacity in the IFs to customize assessment tools, look at the gap analysis for the targeted population was increased. I mentioned the generic core access program that was developed and delivered, and as well as academic upgrading. There was basic educational program which related to courses in reading and writing and math and technology. And for many of these women, if you have a chance to view the full video, you'll see how important that was to them to be able to further their studies and have their learning recognized. Sector-specific tourism and hospitality training was also incorporated into the project, and this is where the colleges began assisted with this development. That in terms of the sectors that were covered in the project with training, the variety of IFs, the sectors included things like food processing, culinary arts, fishery and fish processing, fashion, and crafts and recycling projects. I'll just let you hear a bit more from the video.
Ele proporciona momento em que nós paramos para conhecer toda a história de vida dessa mulher.
Vocês vão desenhar, vão escrever, se quiser escrever uma poesia pode, não é? Mas que tem a ver com a realidade da vida de vocês, não é? Desde quando vocês nasceram, o que vocês viveram até hoje, né? O que vocês são hoje e aonde vocês querem chegar daqui para frente, tá certo?
Quando elas relatam a trajetória de vida e o ingresso no projeto, o que a gente percebe principalmente é a questão da ampliação dos horizontes, um despertar.
Aí é que entra a metodologia RAP, que foi o primeiro grande foco, né, e objeto da cooperação. Era o Canadá transferir, compartilhar essa experiência e essa metodologia RAP, que é justamente a avaliação e reconhecimento de aprendizagem prévia, né, para os nossos institutos.
É uma metodologia que o Canadá tem trabalhado há anos, onde as pessoas chegam nas faculdades canadenses e elas podem validar conhecimentos que não necessariamente foram adquiridos em sala de aula. Então pode ser experiência de vida que elas já tiveram, por já trabalhar na área, aprenderam fazendo, e eles podem fazer ou uma prova, um teste, alguma coisa que mostre que ele tem habilidade naquela área específica. Então, a faculdade certifica esse conhecimento.
Uma certificação onde ela tem aquela garantia de que ela vai poder, a partir de agora, ela vai poder ter um trabalho com dignidade, ela se sente mais valorizada, é um resgate de valores muito grande para as mulheres, com certeza.
Thank you. If you were able to read the clips on the bottom of that video, you'll see that those were some of the beginning pieces around PLAR. The women were involved with doing life maps and really looking at the learning that they already had and beginning to move forward by first looking at how important their life experiences were. And we all know what a terribly important part of RPL that is. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed up a bit here. Red River College's participation included participation in a number of areas similar to the other colleges. We collaborated on some of the basic training programs. We also collaborated quite a bit around the access system, and Marty Ford, who was our former Dean of the School of Indigenous Education at the college, and some of her faculty were able to work with the project around the access services. We also worked with prior learning assessment and recognition, and this was for me a real key piece to the project. We were fortunate to be able to be a part of the orientation around PLAR, help with some of the resources and tools, as well as delivery of our Rpl Foundation Course to 20 key, most of them were deans from the IFs in Brazil, and we were able to deliver that basic course over a period of two different weeks to ensure that that basic belief and learning around PLAR was built into the system. This is a screenshot of the video, and please, the video tells an amazing story. Please feel free to go there and watch the video. The project had great success, and there were many successes. These women's lives were changed. In addition to that, there were many benefits, certainly for the Canadian colleges as well, and for working on a project like this. There's ongoing commitment and work on the project. The project was further expanded into a national project with the goal of, instead of 1,000 women going through this type of project, 10,000 women. There's a research a center looking at the impact of assessment project on the further work on this particular project. So it really has grown from a very, initially a small project into a formal system for women, disadvantaged women throughout Brazil.
The 1,000 Women program is taking place at a time when the federal institutes are moving to the interior of the country, reaching communities that have never before had access to quality professional and technological education. The 1,000 Women program aims at the formation of a vast social network built on sensitivity and held together by solidarity. New horizons are opening up in the lives of these women, horizons that lead to professional and personal growth. Many Brazilian women are following the same path, becoming masters of their own destiny and building a more just and fraternal society.
Thank you very much, and I'll be pleased to answer questions later.
Thanks, Deb. That was a great introduction to how PLAR can help people in the community start to come back into the workplace and start to gain confidence and some skills. I'm now going to ask Hanne Kristensen to come up and talk about the vocational education training in Norway. Hanne?
Thank you, Gail. Good morning, everybody, and to our online participants. I just choose to say hello. I think it's easier to deal with the time differences. First of all, I would like to thank Gail and CAPLA for inviting me here. It's been very interesting, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the day. My name is Hamid Kristensen. I work for the European Centre for the Development of Vocational Training, which is a European Union agency. I'm on a secondment there, so this is one of my hats. My other hat, the ordinary hat, is that I work for the Agency of Lifelong Learning in Norway, which is under the Ministry of Education and Research, dealing with what we call validation, which is RPL, which is PLAR, and other adult learning issues. So I'll go back there after the secondment. My perspective today will be from the other end of the world, from what we just saw. It will be Norwegian and it will be systemic. We're going to look at vocational education training and RPL in VED in particular. I'll try to outline what we're thinking right now also when it comes to the challenges connected to making visible competencies from outside the education system, especially from the workplace and from NGOs, liberal adult education, non-governmental organizations. And all this within 10 minutes, I think. 12. First, a quick look at the possibilities for VET. You can get initial VET as upper secondary education, coming up through the obligatory school system and directly into upper secondary education. We have the first 10 years are obligatory in Norway. Normally it's 2 + 2 years with some minor variations. It means 2 years of school followed by a 2-year apprenticeship, then a final practical and theoretical exam for the trade certificate or the journeyman certificate. Another possibility is that if you change your mind once you have the trade certificate up after that schooling, you can take an extra year of general studies and enter higher education. Or if you're an adult, you can have RPL possibilities, which we'll look at in this presentation. Tertiary vocational education is a specialized vocational education within a wide range of subjects, and especially technical subjects, ranging from a half-year course to 2 years. Provision is often quite flexible, since these students are mostly, or a lot of the students there are adults. You can enroll there with a VET trade certificate from upper secondary or through RPL. I should add, I think, that all content and curricula throughout this whole system is described in terms of learning outcomes. So we've got there, at least. Some examples of subjects in tertiary vocational education can be healthcare, technical subjects like construction, lots of maritime subjects, arts, drama, beauty things, nail, flower, decoration. Really a wide range of subjects. Now that you have a little background, let's see what RPL in VET can do for people at the upper secondary level first. And I should say that these are mostly adults when I talk about RPL students, because you have youth rights or statutory rights as a youngster. But when you're 25, you go into the adult rights group. To say something about the scope first, in 2010 we saw that 14% of people in upper secondary education were RPL students, meaning adults. The biggest group was found in vocational education training, and they will be women who want to formalize their healthcare experience through going through this healthcare and social studies and becoming certified. RPL can exempt them from some of the coursework or all of the coursework, but they have to sit the same exam as everybody else to get the certificate at the end. Legislation gives adults a right to RPL and a right to upper secondary education, which is then adapted to fill the gaps, as it were. So all of it, you can get all of it, or you can get what you need, and there's an RPL process to go with it. Some counties really do this very well. This is a county authority responsibility. So some counties are really good, they do it well, they have tailor-made processes, and others don't do it very well. So this is part of the intention behind the revitalized initiatives right now that we're quite happy to have. Because just now, or maybe after Christmas, that's why I put the question mark, 2013 question mark, the Directorate for Education will issue or has issued a set of guidelines to ensure that there is equal practice and quality across the counties in RPL. And this is a guideline for RPL for adults in secondary education. They emphasize again that this is a statutory individual right that every adult has, and it's a responsibility of the county authorities to actually do it, to realize the right and to assure the quality in the process. The guidelines include recommendations on training of assessors, but no requirements, so you don't really have to do it, but It's recommended that you have training. And I think the three last points there I find particularly interesting because, well, the process should benefit the learner as a general principle, but the documentation, they underline again that we're not talking about a kind of inferior documentation or a sort of B certificates. They equal school results. It's the same, it's as good as a trade certificate from an ordinary school path. And the third last there, the national curricula are the standards. They are the criteria that we measure against, but we're not looking for identical competences. We talk about equal, not identical, which is a huge difference, and I think this is a really important thing to underline, that you're supposed to look for equal competence. It also says a bit about method, which are sort of the middle points there. Methods should be good. They should be fit for purpose. They should reveal tacit knowledge. And I think this is, it's important to mention that because we can't really take it for granted. And it also states very clearly that written documentation alone is not acceptable. If you rely solely on taking in or having people send in written documentation, you're not doing your job. You've got to talk to the candidate. I think this is excellent, and it's sort of a push again to, as I said, revitalize this whole praxis. If we look at RPL in tertiary vocational education and what can it do for adults there, first of all, there are about 7% RPL students. The total is 14,000, so it's not like this is a huge sector, but it's growing in importance, I'd say. 2/3 of the people there are men. It's very much a continuing adult education thing to go there after a couple of years in the trades. Some of the schools do RPL without calling it by that name, so these numbers are deceptive, I'd say. And over the last year, we've seen a 23% increase in RPL-based applications. So somebody's doing a job on information to the students here. We suspect it's the school recruiting and that the schools want more students. This is especially happening in engineering, nursing, economics, especially those subjects. Now, legislation says here that adults can be admitted, as I mentioned earlier, on the basis of RPL if they don't have a vet certificate. Lots of people go into work without finishing their upper secondary school. Then they can come back into this without the certificate through RPL processes. My agency, which is Vox, the Norwegian agency, is responsible for keeping track of the developments here. So we had a national survey to check the status. How many validations do you do and how do you do it? The results show that 57% of the schools work with RPL processes, but there's a lot of insecurity around how to do it, around the procedures and the methods. So we decided, in collaboration with the sector, to develop a set of guidelines for enrollment based on RPL processes. We concentrated on giving useful, hands-on, practical advice and clarifying roles, and also in this clarification, placing responsibility with staff. I mean, it's too easy to shove the responsibility onto the student, so we really want this to be clear. If you think about what I said about the guidelines for RPL that just arrived in upper secondary education, I think these are very positive developments, and it will impact the use and quality of RPL in VET at both levels. It will benefit adults. It will support careers development and work education transitions, because this is the sector where people go in and out. Or they go out first, and then they come back in, then they go out again, and maybe come back into this sector. Okay, so we have this legislation. We have these possibilities, and what are they for? I think one thing is to give adults the opportunity to get their competence validated for further learning and work purposes and all these things that we know of, all career development and changing jobs and getting jobs and so on, progress, go into education, and also personal development, which is a quite strong factor in the Scandinavian countries, at least. We're very keen on personal development. I reckon they all look familiar to you, these points. But the other important intention is giving young people a second chance. If we look at those who do not finish initial upper secondary education within the normal time, which is 3 to 4 years, the rate is high and stable at just below 30% who don't finish. And this is after the obligatory schooling, so you can drop out if you want to. And there are this, retention is a hot potato in political discussions, probably like in other countries. And what we see is that there are substantial regional and especially socio-economic differences behind this average percentage of 30%. And this is not good, of course, but over a longer period, those who finish after more than the normal time, the rate is down to 18%. And if we then look at the number of people who complete upper secondary by the time they're 30 years old, the rate is even further reduced. And this is especially in vet. And in this picture, RPL is a vital factor, because when people drop out and come back, which they do, it's a very strong motivating factor that your acquired knowledge, what you were doing while you were out of the schooling, can really count for something when you want to go back in. And of course, on top of that, you need flexible provision and counselling and all that. But I think the idea that you can actually get something for what you've already learned is really vital in this picture. If we look at other settings, these are hand-knitted mittens, if you want to know, in Norwegian patterns. This is the voluntary sector. This is what they do. Well, it's not only what they do, but that's the myth. They do they do crafts. But it's not true. They do other things as well. They do languages. They do all sorts of things. They do preparatory courses for university education. They do everything. This idea that you learn in other settings is very strong in Scandinavia. You've got the Grundtvig folk high school movement, and you've got the labour movement, which is really strong on learning, and earlier on was really strong on promoting people's rights to learning outside of the academic world, in a way. Participation in these activities is very high. Around 500,000 people go through courses every year. There are vast amounts of different kinds of things you can do there. They have 37,000 courses every year, so it's a big thing. And they're holistic in approach. They believe in the potential of the individual and all these wonderful things. But there's a lot of discussion about how to make this competence visible and how to make it transferable. Even if it's for your personal fun, you can still take something with you, but it's not really being made visible as it is now. The progress in this field is, progress in documentation is very slow. There is not enough systematic documentation. Competence mapping is possible, it's available, but it's not compulsory, so it often doesn't happen. The upside is that the sector itself is working on piloting schemes to improve the situation in cooperation with the stakeholders. But it's a very heterogeneous sector, and provision comes in all sizes and shapes and all kinds of practices. So it's sort of a bit difficult to get a hold of. And the other sector which is difficult to get a hold of is working life, as you know. This is the most important sector for adult learning in general. But it's very hard to get a handle on what's actually going on apart from sporadic projects. The social partners are interested, everybody's interested in this, everybody's very much involved in RPL thinking and development processes at policy level. And the benefits are clear for the employers and the employees alike. And it's even in the basic agreement that's part of the negotiations between the partners. That documentation is a good thing, and it should happen, but it often does not. There might be time and money issues. we have very many very small enterprises. 85% of them are below 10 people. Something needs to be done there. So I've put Ministerial Working Group on NQF visibility at the bottom. This is a new and exciting prospect, and we're quite excited about that. The Ministry of Education has invited the social partners to the table to discuss, explore and suggest possible solutions on how to make competencies from working life visible in the NQF. The social partners have been criticising the NQF quite heavily since it came a couple of years ago, because it's centred on the education system, which is true. So now they have their chance. This is their chance to really say what it is they do and how they want it to appear in the NQF. And I'm optimistic, because I think that this cannot be done without talking about RPL. And this will then make that visible as well. So we're quite expectant, and there are many questions here about which standards should apply and on whose terms should competence be expressed. All these questions about, all the points where education and working life clash, more or less. But it's a start, and it will be a very interesting forum to follow. They've got a 2-year mandate starting from now, and we'll see what comes out of that. This was a small taste of our RPL policies for starters, along with some of our challenges here. And I hope I've managed to give you some idea, although it's a very brief overview. And I'll be happy to take your questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Hanne, for that overview. And I'm not sure, I think one of the things in seeing that some of the challenges are common in various countries of the world make us feel better, just the fact that we can share those common challenges. So we'll look forward to seeing what Norway does within those areas as well. There was a question online as far as whether this session was going to be available for download afterwards. It is being videotaped, and that video will be online at www.capla.ca, and we'll send the information to everybody online. So some people are having some slow streaming, so that's just for information, mainly for those online. So now we're going to connect to James Keevy in South Africa, who's going to come from a different perspective within the guidelines, and this is looking more at the systems piece and the policy piece of how that can assist in support of both development and implementation of the RPL. So there may be a slight 5-second delay or something in getting James. This is really tough, 5-second delay, right? But we're going to see here, bringing James on from South Africa, and we've just handed out some of the copies, so that maybe one at each table, of the RPL document, which I have to say I think is an absolutely wonderful document. It is easily read, covers everything, and I think we can all learn a great deal from it. James?
Hello, Gail. It's good to be part of your conference, even though I'm all the way from South Africa. Thank you to CAPLA for the opportunity to be part of this, and greetings to everybody on your side. I'm sure Joy and Phil and a couple of people are in the audience, so really thank you very much for the opportunity. What I'm going to share with you briefly is the policy that we've developed in South Africa over the last few years, and we're busy implementing now. As Gail has stated, I think it's quite a progressive policy in the sense that it sets quite clear guidelines for a number of people, number of organizations in terms of their responsibilities in terms of the implementation of RPL. So a couple of things, let me go. I'm going to try and do the slides remotely, so tell me if it's going a bit slow. One of the first things we see in South Africa is the expectations on RPL have been significant. Many of you that know South Africa would know that we're one of the most unequal societies in the world. And it seems like RPL increasingly is being positioned as a panacea. I think in the early years the NQF played this role, but increasingly RPL has been seen as a mechanism to kind of cross this divide of inequality. Gradually, I think we are making progress, but the progress is slow, and as in many other countries, I think we face many obstacles. What I'm going to do in the presentation is I'm going to take you through, as Gail has stated, the policy that we've developed, and just broadly, a few screenshots, just highlight a few things so you can get a sense of what the policy is about. 5 key areas that we're looking at. The first one is we're looking at resources. As you would know, without resources, we will fail to implement RPL. Looking at the complexity of RPL, based on research with one of our universities in South Africa that was led by Alan Ralphs, we found and we understand RPL as more than just a form of assessment. We also see some pedagogy involved in the delivery of RPL, and this policy is trying to reflect that. We also look at quality assurance, which you would agree with me is important. We look at the barriers, and then the last one, which is very much in line with the UNESCO RBA guidelines, is the national coordination of RPL. But I'll get back to this point. Here's the first page of the policy, and as Gail held it up there, you can also download it for everybody who's online. I'm really just going to highlight a few key things. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but have a look at a few things here. The first one is we've come a long way in South Africa with the RPL. Since 2002, we've had policy in place. The latest policy, which you see now, has been as a review of the earlier policy and builds on it. So this is not a completely new initiative, but it's really building on our early experiences. Point 5 on the slide there is quite important, and this is the relationship between RPL and the NQF. People like Patrick Workin, I'm not sure whether Patrick is listening or in the audience, has made a strong point, or has really asked a lot of questions about the relationship between RPL and NQFs and whether it's wise to implement RPL within the context of an NQF. In South Africa, this is a decision we've made many years ago, looking at our history. We have embedded RPL in the NQF, and we do our best to implement it in this way. But of course, it's come with some obstacles as well. If you go to the next slide, the next page, point 6E, as I mentioned earlier, national coordination is a big thing at the moment in South Africa. We found, working with the OECD, that we have islands of good practice, but we're struggling to mainstream the RPL. SAQA at the moment, the organization I work for, the South African Qualification Authority, is positioning itself to lead the coordination of RPL in the absence of another body. But it might be that in future we will actually put a body in place to do this coordination. At the moment we have a number of projects across about 15, 16 sites where we are directly involved in industry, higher education and so on, where we coordinate the RPL. Point 9 on the next slide, you will see the policy clearly outlines the responsibilities. This policy applies to quality councils, which are the 3 bodies in South Africa that oversee our quality assurance system. It applies to both education and skills development providers, workplaces, and recognized professional bodies. Not all of you might be familiar with the South African system, but we have an agreement in place in South Africa where professional bodies apply to SAQA for recognition to be able to operate in the education and training system. This is a new requirement that's been in place for a couple of years, and I must say from where I sit, it's definitely proving worthwhile. And for the first time, we're able to see holistically what's happening in our system, from a provider point of view, from a learner point of view, from an employer, as well as a professional body. The policy covers qualifications and part qualifications, as well as professional designations, to kind of bring in that professional component. And then we also make some differentiation between our 3 sectors: higher education, the schooling and the college sector, and the occupational sector. This is a national policy, so it covers all these sectors, and we expect each of these sectors to develop their own policies and to contextualize the policies. You will see there's the definition of RPL. This is kind of where we are at the moment. We've tried to go for a simple definition so that people can engage with it and understand it. You can see a strong emphasis on making skills visible. The previous presentation also made mention of this. It speaks about the mediation and about the assessment. But the important thing here is more than the assessment, it's not only that. Point 30 is quite important. When you look through the policy, we speak about RPL as multidimensional. We're really trying to encourage various providers and various institutions to become involved in RPL, not only in the formal sense, but also through the workplace and in many other ways. And career guidance, of course, is also very important to us. In terms of our understanding of RPL, we look at mainly 2 forms of RPL. RPL for access and RPL for credits. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with these terms. In terms of access, we talk about RPL being delivered and received by a candidate, but without the candidate necessarily receiving the qualification or the credits. But the person, the candidate, obtains access to further study or even to progression within the employment sector. RPL for credits, of course, is when the RPL assessment is formal and the credits are awarded to the student. Here are a couple of our policy priorities, and I'll just briefly go through them and I won't read them in detail. The first one is around resourcing. As many of you would know, working in the RPL sector, resourcing is a key issue. We found in South Africa in particular that we don't have a national systemic approach to the funding of RPL. We have all sorts of agreements in place, but many of them exclude RPL funding. So we've tried through the policy to really encourage specific funding for specific RPL projects. The second policy priority is around effective delivery. And here we talk about building on things that we've done before, on lessons we've learned so far. We also talk about setting clear targets for RPL. The monitoring and evaluation part of RPL, as set out in the RBA guidelines as well, is incredibly important, and we're trying to focus on this in the years to come. The next one is quality assurance. I'm sure we'll all agree on the quality assurance. And so we're looking at RPL across our three sectors and the way the quality assurance can be done in this regard. The last one here is the national coordination. I've spoken about it a couple of times now, and we're really trying to build some capacity around this, to have a national hub. You can call it a clearinghouse or a national coordination point where RPL can be managed on a national scale. And so you can watch the space in the coming years. There's a lot of work that's happening in South Africa around this. These are the kind of things we talk about when we engage with the coordination of RPL. We talk about research. We talk about the professional development of RPL practitioners. We talk about strategic projects. Ilana Michelson, based in the US, has worked with us closely around this and done some work, and there's some papers you can read if you're interested. We talk about support and advice, the monitoring, and then, of course, as well, advocacy and marketing. If our public don't understand and know about the system, they really struggle to use it. Time's running out, Gail, so I'll be brief around this. We're clear around the responsibilities of SACWA in terms of the overall guidance through the National Qualifications Framework, and we set this out in a transparent way so that our stakeholders can also see it. Then our three quality councils, and you'll see there's quite an extensive list of things that our quality councils are responsible for. I'm not going to go through all of them, but one of the key ones there is the monitoring of RPL implementation. I'm giving you a lot of information, so please take the document and read it in detail. Our intention is not to go through it point by point. The next responsibility is around our providers, and we really put the focus here that they take ownership and responsibility of the RPL across our various sectors. We found, particularly in our workplaces, there's a lot of work to be done in encouraging RPL uptake in this area. Our professional bodies, we encourage our professional bodies to get involved in the RPL, particularly when it comes to their designations. Often the prerequisite for a designation is not specifically a qualification only, but also additional workplace learning and experience. And RPL can play an important role here. And in this regard, SACWA is working closely with the professional bodies. Responsibilities of our RPL practitioners, we bring them in as well and indicate to them that they have a contribution to make, and we agree on this nationally. And then the candidates, we felt in terms of the policy process, it'd be useful to talk to the candidates as well. And you can see we've taken broad things here, like accepting responsibility as an equal partner, expect to be treated without unfair discrimination, and then respect the process and procedures of the institutions and the workplaces. So that's really our policy. This is just a list of the people that were involved. You can see we had a broad consultative process. It's really been a worthwhile process in South Africa, and we feel we're ready now to move to the next phase of our RPL implementation. We have a conference coming up in February next year. Of course, most of you are invited if you can make it. The idea is really to focus on RPL implementation. So in terms of our abstracts and our engagement with people all over the world, it's been an emphasis on what really makes RPL work. And you will see our policy is kind of skewed in that direction. It's about focusing on the implementation of RPL. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Gail, and to everybody in Toronto. It's been a privilege sharing this with you, and I hope it has benefited the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much, James. For those of you who were here last year, you may remember that James was actually here in Canada last year and presented. So this is a wonderful follow-up to that. So thank you, James, for taking your time to join us in this manner today. Just want to finish off with one slide that Hanne's going to talk about in sort of upcoming future possibilities and potential for greater sharing through UNESCO. Very quickly. And, while this slide is coming up, I'm going to just mention, so that I don't take time afterwards, that CAPLA is just starting into, for those on the webcast, a new quality assurance project on assessing immigrant skills and competencies using quality practices. And it will be exploring good practices and helping to develop guidelines for assessors who evaluate the informal learning of internationally trained workers and help remove barriers to employment. And part of what we would invite for our people around the world is to participate in this and help us in the sense of international perspective of developing these guidelines. So if you're interested in any of this, we'll put up more, but you can also email to IPLAN@capla.ca. That's IPLAN@capla.ca, and we can connect you to participation. Hanne?
Just 2 minutes to talk about the RVA Observatory. You're familiar with the guidelines from last year, the RVA guidelines. To go with this, one of the commitments listed in the guidelines is that there would be an observatory, and now it's coming up. If you note down the page there, you click on program areas, you click on lifelong learning policies and strategies, and then you find the recognition, validation, and accreditation of non-formal and informal learning. Under that point, you find the guidelines, and then you will find the observatory. And please note that it's still under construction, but I spoke to them and they said it will go on the website in a couple of weeks. So it's sort of coming. All the material is there, it's being finalized, it's just about the publishing process. What is it? It's an online repository of country-specific information. It's got country profiles, case studies on RPL, implementation in different arenas. It's got a common structure to ease comparison. It's got material from partner organizations from 23 different nations across the globe, from the Middle East, from Asia, Oceania, Central America, Africa and Europe. And it's listed, as I said, in the RVA guidelines as one of the commitments to strengthen international cooperation and capacity building, to support the implementation of the guidelines, to share expertise and promote cooperation among national stakeholders across countries. It would be a great resource, I think, for RVA actors, PRL actors in general. It will identify common obstacles, common issues and problems. It will make visible a wide range of different and interesting practices. So if you want to learn more about it, please take it. I've got some flyers here in this red folder. You can take one of those. You can visit the website. And for those who follow the webinar online, the flyer is also on this UIL website. Thank you.
Thanks, Hanne. Unfortunately, we're kind of coming to the end of the time right now, but there were a few questions came in online, so we'll ask the people to give us some answers to that, and again, we'll try and post it on with the video online so you can see it afterwards. So thank you for your participation today, for those people both here in the room and throughout the world. It's wonderful that our world is as small as it is, that we can be in this kind of communication more often with people around the world to share things. So hopefully we can do this again soon. If you have other topics you're interested in, please let us know. Thanks particularly to the panelists today, both here and in South Africa. And we hope that it has been of value to you today in learning a few new things that you can take home to others. Thank you very much.